Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Zina. I'm a Digital Marketing Manager at APSCo, and today I'm pleased to be joined by the Professional Apprenticeship Consortium in an insightful webinar exploring the new apprenticeship landscape. Before we start the session, I just wanted to mention that this webinar is being recorded, and everyone who registered to attend will receive a copy of the recording as well as the presentation slides. Also, along with prospectus and some other assets giving you more information on apprenticeships. Our speakers today are here to answer all of your questions. So if you have any kind of queries, please feel free to leave those in the chat box. And throughout the webinar, I will make sure we answer all of your questions. Okay, then, shall we start then? Julie, do you want to start?
I'm actually going to hand you straight over to Asmat, who's going to introduce himself. So, Asmat, where are you going?
Right, so my name's Asmat Mohammed. I run the British Institute of Recruiters. So we support recruitment businesses and help them in terms of starting a business, growing a business, and developing their people. And we do that through various mechanisms of support like legal support, business support, qualifications, courses, and resources. So our members are predominantly recruitment businesses, which are actually a big portion are 3 to 5 people, single staff, and we go right to the other end as well. So we've got various businesses within Pertemps membership. So we've got lots of different types of companies coming to us for courses and qualifications and support. So that's what we do at the British Institute of Recruiters.
Okay, on to John.
I think John.
All right, my name's John Lim. I'm the contracts manager for the British Institute of Recruiters Business School. The Business School is our training arm, rather, of the BIOR. We've set that up predominantly to offer very effective delivery of apprenticeships for the recruitment sector and within the HR sectors. And that's really to ensure that you have a sector-specific organisation that can support your needs within that. From a personal point of view, I've been involved in post-16 education for about the last 20 years. I have worked as an HR and training manager for large retail companies. I have run my own business in the past, working with training providers, colleges of further education and universities. So I've seen the whole change in how the landscape of post-16 education has developed and moved on. So kind of very excited now to be part of the BIOR Business School and moving forward in the new era of apprenticeships.
Lovely, thanks John. So I'm Julie Bowen and I represent APSCo. So we're the Association of Professional Staffing Companies, and we're a trade association representing recruitment companies within the professional markets. We've got a spread across the UK, Asia, Australia, New Zealand and Germany. And we support businesses to achieve their business growth through the provision of a number of different interventions, including research insights, thought leadership events, lobbying government on key legislative issues, and training and development. I've got a 30-year background in HR, talent management, employee engagement, and learning and development. I now head up the talent development team at APSCo, where we provide recruitment-specific classroom training for recruiters, managers, and leaders to APSCo members and non-members. Okay, over to Fraser.
Hi everybody, my name's Fraser Ingham. I'm a Director at SkillsFirst Awards. We're a regulated awarding organisation and approved endpoint assessment organisation. We offer around 140 qualifications at levels 1 to 5 for people seeking employment or working in a range of different sectors. We're working with about 200 colleges, providers and employers every month. We're approved to offer endpoint assessment for customer service and team leader standards, and we've been heavily involved in the development of the recruitment qualifications and new standards, and we'll be seeking to offer endpoint assessment for those as soon as we possibly can. Thanks.
Thank you, Fraser. Okay, so as far as an agenda is concerned, we've got quite a busy agenda to run through, and we're going to all sort of contribute to that. And as Zina said, please, if you've got any questions throughout, put them through the chat box. But broadly, we're going to talk through the benefit of apprentices and how the system works, the current apprenticeship landscape, an overview of the Professional Apprenticeship Consortium, and then an overview of the apprenticeships delivered by the consortium. Now we've got quite a mixed audience on the webinar today, so we are going to take it right back to basics. So please bear with us if you know some of these bits, but we're doing it for the benefit of those who are new to the whole apprenticeship world. And also we've already, as part of the Apprenticeship Consortium, been talking to our members, our respective members, and we've had a whole host of questions come through. So we've collated some of the most common questions, and we're going to take you through some of those Q&A type sessions as we go through, plus a few facts and figures. So the first question we wanted to really start with is quite simply, what is an apprenticeship? And Asma, I think you'd like to pick up on this to start with.
Yeah, so in its basic form, it's government-funded work-based training. So it basically is for people who are 16 years and over, and it combines on-the-job training with qualifications, so the nationally recognised qualifications. And it basically, the reason for apprenticeships is to build a skilled workforce. So effectively what we're doing is we're saying you're getting on-the-job skills that are pertinent to where you work, but at the same time, in many apprenticeships, not all, but in many apprenticeships, you're getting a qualification, a recognised qualification as well. So in its basic form, that's what it is. People who are on an apprenticeship are working in a company and gaining training and a qualification in many cases for a minimum of 12 months, but it can go, apprenticeships can last a lot longer than that. So that's what an apprenticeship is.
There are some obligations, aren't there, on the employer to support an apprenticeship through the duration of the programme. What would you say those obligations are?
Yeah. So effectively, it's not just about the learner and the actual training provider. The on-the-job training and support, a big part of it is what the employer is doing with the apprentice while they're working there. So you can't expect an apprentice in every situation to know everything and be an employee that has all the answers from day one. You've got to put in training from an employer's point of view. You've got to put in support from an employer's point of view. You've got to understand that the program is 12 months or longer. So you've got to be committed to working with that individual to support them through their learning and development for a period of time. Now, one of the new rules in apprenticeships is the fact that around 20% of their time they might be in your office and being paid, but they're not doing their day-to-day job. So you have to allow that kind of time for them to be doing learning and development rather than what you're paying them to do while they're in the office. So there is a big commitment on the employer side, obviously a huge commitment on the trainer side, and together, hopefully with the willing participation of the apprentice, you end up with somebody who is highly motivated, skilled, and very productive in your business.
Cool. And there are some common misconceptions, aren't there, around apprenticeships? Can you share what they come up as most frequently? Yeah,
so I mean, one of the key misconceptions of people who do apprenticeships, maybe they don't do well at school, or it's for people in manual industries, or it's for new people who come into a business. That none of that is the case. The reality is you can be of any age and do an apprenticeship. You can be at any level and do an apprenticeship. You can be a manager in a business doing a qualification that is key to your development as a business leader. You could have been there for 20 years and you could be somebody who's on a really good salary. So it's not about new people coming into a business, new people who don't have the training yet and they're coming into the business on the ground level, and you're trying. That's part of it, but it's not all of it. So we've had conversations with recruitment companies who are less interested, let's say, in the level 2 resourcing apprenticeship, more interested in the level 3 management apprenticeship, which is effectively taking existing managers in the business and giving them a high level qualification, but using the apprenticeship mechanism to fund it. So it's not about new people coming into your business, it's also about your existing workforce and supporting them at any level. So it's not low quality in terms of the qualifications that you get. It's not about just new people or school leavers, and it's not about manual industries. It's professional services in a big way as well. And employers are learning all these new things as they're hearing more and more about the new apprenticeship standards.
Cool. Thanks, Asma. John, have you got anything to add to that?
No, I think that covered it pretty well. I think the way I look at it, I think it very much it's been the branding of apprenticeships which I think has confused many people. And I would say, and I think Asmat really kind of summed it up there, that an apprenticeship is really the funding mechanics behind delivering a high quality industry and job related program for people of levels from level 2 through to level 7, which is a degree apprenticeship. And it's something for everybody. I think people get very wrapped up on the traditions of an apprenticeship and it having to be a new starter who knows nothing. It isn't that at all. It's moved on massively from the old traditions of apprenticeships in engineering. And I think it's really to look at the name apprenticeship as the funding mechanics behind a very professionally delivered program.
Fantastic, thanks John. We're going to explore this in a bit more detail. In fact, we're going to now move to Fraser, who's just going to talk us through some of the language that if you start to take apprentices on within your businesses, or if you've already got them in your business at the moment, you may be familiar with some of the processes, but that's moved on. And Fraser's just going to talk us through what the new approach is and how we're moving from the world of, on the left-hand side on your visual here, of the frameworks into the new world of standards. So Fraser, do you want to pick up on that point?
Yeah, sure. So without going into too much detail, essentially, as Julie's just mentioned, we're moving from apprenticeship frameworks to apprenticeship standards. In frameworks, it was continuous learning, very much based around qualifications, where a training provider or a college or employer would sign off and say that that person was competent at the end of it. Moving into the world of new trailblazers, these have very much been led by groups of employers. And they set the knowledge and the skills and the behaviours that they feel demonstrate that someone working in that job role should be able to demonstrate to do the job most effectively. The big change in the new Trailblazer standards is that they've also introduced something called endpoint assessment, which means that in addition to the apprentice being demonstrating their knowledge and behaviours throughout the period of their apprenticeship, at the end an independent organisation also comes in and makes a judgment on whether that person is competent, and that endpoint assessment is also graded, and that's something they've introduced to apprenticeships for the first time. So we're moving from frameworks to standards with a couple of quite significant changes, but the big thing to say is they're very much employer-led, and this is all the government's way of trying to ensure that people working in the UK become more productive.
Thanks. And we know, don't we, that for the recruitment resourcer and the recruitment consultant new standards, that we've had some quite large recruitment organisations within the UK contributing to those standards. So we can be sure that people following them are going to be well equipped at the end of their 12-month assignment in actually be able to do a really good job in the business and adding value back into that business, rather than potentially having followed the old frameworks that worked more around sort of administrative type roles. The standards are far more geared to the proper, the sales job of a recruiter or a resourcer. Just on that point, Fraser, you talked about the EPA. If you could just take us through perhaps this slide, just reinforcing some of those points that you just made around the endpoint assessment, so people are clear on it.
Sure. So essentially, as I mentioned, it is one of the key changes in the apprenticeship reforms. Essentially, this is an organisation, and we're approved by government be one of these, not for recruitment at the moment, because until the standards are finally signed off by the Department for Education, you can't actually apply, but we are for a number of other standards. And essentially we're an independent organisation who comes in and essentially makes sure that the apprentice has the knowledge and competency and can demonstrate the behaviours to do the job most effectively. As I mentioned before, nearly all endpoint assessments are graded, often pass and distinction or pass, merit and distinction, and 20% of the funding for the overall apprenticeship is held back to make sure that there is enough money to pay for that endpoint assessment. In terms of recruitment, the endpoint assessment is likely to be a project assignment and a professional discussion. They'll be weighted. The project will be about 40% and the professional discussion 60%. And the apprentice will have to produce a project based on a topic that the assessment organisation would set of about 3,000 words, which we will mark and grade, and then there'll be a professional discussion of about 45 to 60 minutes, where the apprentice will demonstrate their knowledge and behaviour, and that will be graded pass and distinction.
So I think it really goes back, doesn't it, to show that commitment and obligation of the employer having to give the time to these people who are going through this learning programme to be able to fulfil the requirements of this endpoint assessment. It was just take us to this next slide, because there's quite a few other methods, aren't there? You talked about a couple of the methods there, Fraser, for assessing, but there are quite a lot of other different interventions that can be used to assess the knowledge and competence of the learner.
Yeah, so essentially, as I mentioned in the recruitment sector, they decided that a project assignment and a professional discussion were the best ways of assessing someone's knowledge and competence. But really, it is up to each employer group to decide what they think the best way of assessing knowledge and competence is for their sector. So we'll see work portfolios, a lot of exams, multiple choice tests, interviews. It really does depend on each apprenticeship standard. So if you are looking at standards outside of recruitment, say team leading or management, customer service, business administration, you need to look at each individual assessment plan to see how they are endpoint assessed. And as Julie mentions, a big change in the role of a provider now is actually preparing people for these endpoint assessments and not just focusing on the achievement of qualifications, which is the way that apprenticeships used to be assessed wholly in the past.
Okay, thanks for that. Someone's just asked actually in the chat room, is this a recognised qualification assessment by the government?
Yeah, yes, they are. They're recognised qualifications. Absolutely, they are. They're the only ones that can be within these apprenticeships. So if there's a qualification in there, it will be on the government's register as a recognised qualification.
Okay, cool. Okay.
So we're regulated. So it's Fraser again from Skills First. We're regulated by Ofqual, essentially the government authority for regulating qualifications, and we have to submit all of our qualifications to Ofqual, and they have to confirm that obviously they're happy with them, and they audit them on a regular basis, and only those qualifications which are regulated can be part of this apprenticeship standard.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so one of the other questions that we had common question that's come up since we created the consortium is around this next point here. Why should recruitment businesses consider taking on apprentices?
Asmat from the British Institute of Recruiters. So I think one of the key things here is that you can appreciate is that for many recruitment businesses, one of the things that smaller businesses, let's say, have got issues with is that they can't afford to have the training and development in place that maybe bigger companies can afford to have. This completely changes everything. Now, a small business, medium-sized business can have the same level of support, training, qualifications for an apprentice than the larger organizations. These are agreed standards, agreed competencies and behaviors and skills, agreed qualifications, so everybody's getting the same level of expertise in the business and productivity. So if you're a small recruitment business, you don't have the capability or capacity internally to train people like a larger business. All you need to do is get your people onto this program, and the training organization will support you in getting those people to the same level that has been agreed by a stakeholder group of huge recruitment companies, global recruitment companies and small ones that were part of that stakeholder group, making sure your staff are trained to that same level playing field. So for smaller businesses, this is a fantastic opportunity to say, right, we can tick the box of making sure our staff are properly trained, properly supported and have the knowledge and behaviors, and that wasn't the case before. So this is a great opportunity.
Cool. Anything to add, John, just briefly, before we move on?
I think, as Fraser said, the nice thing here is that you've got a national standard, but I think what's really important this time round is that the employers have had a really big say through the Trailblazers in how that should be structured for their specific sector and industry. I think, again, being able to have structured training for smaller businesses particularly, that puts the quality throughout that, helps also in all sizes of businesses from succession planning, helps I think with internal mentoring, and I think staff really look at it as an investment in them, which obviously helps with staff retention and sustainability. So I think it's a really effective way of taking people on, and modern apprentices, new apprentices now really appreciate what an apprenticeship can do for them, and particularly those that might choose an apprenticeship route over and above a traditional university degree route.
Yeah. I think from my point of view, it's this piece where you can assign existing employees the opportunity to follow an apprenticeship for that very reason, that those who may not have done qualifications, degree level qualifications when they, in their youth, can now have a program to follow, supported by their employer, that gets them those qualifications that they've always aspired to. So I think that's a really good piece around that succession and that sort of continual personal development piece. We need to move on because we've got quite a lot to get through and not so much time to do so. So I think the next question, there was just a summary here of the benefits of having apprentices in your business that we've sort of touched on really. The next question really is one of the key ones that's been whirling around for the last few months, and that's getting a better explanation of the apprenticeship options for levy and non-levy payers. So I'm not going to throw that open. I'm going to actually flick through to the next slide because there's a lot of detail in there. I think, Asmat, if you just want to talk us through this detail of what actually is the apprenticeship levy that people have heard of.
Right, so the apprenticeship levy, basically it's a tax, if you like, on businesses that have a pay bill of over £3 million a year. So if you're a large employer, you've got your payroll is over 3 million, 0.5% of your annual payroll will be put towards this levy. And effectively that means that if you, let's say you had a pay bill of about £3 million, you get the first £15,000 of that payroll levy basically refunded to you, so you're not paying that. It's only over that amount. So effectively, if you're a smaller business under that cap of 3 million, you're not paying the levy, you're just having to pay a 10% basically employer contribution. But if you're a larger business, you'll be paying that, and it will go directly into a digital account, and you can't spend it on anything else. So you might, we've been to a recruitment business recently, they've got a £300,000 levy that's sat in this digital account, and they can only use it for one particular purpose, and that is to pay for apprenticeships, and that's it. They can't use it for any other type of training, they can't use it for any other type of support, just apprenticeships, and they've got 24 months to use it. If not, it's basically lost to them and passed to other businesses who want to use it. So it's effectively a tax, a way the government collects money from businesses and says, right, you need to put this into your development of your people through the apprenticeship training program. That's effectively what the levy is.
Okay, cool. So there's been a lot of discussion on that because this is new. However, what we don't want to skip over is the fact that the apprenticeship, there are a number of organisations who won't be paying the apprenticeship levy, and for them they've still got an option of taking apprenticeships on, and that's answered in this next point here. So what if you're not subject to the levy?
Yeah, this is going to be the majority of recruitment businesses in the UK are probably going to be under that 3 million pay cap. So for them, they still get access to all of the apprenticeships, but instead of having a fund taken off them as a tax, they basically get to, the same training and support, but they have to contribute. They have to make an employer contribution of 10% of the actual value of the framework. So just to kind of give you an idea of what that might be, so let's say you wanted to put somebody on a level 3 team leader supervisor apprenticeship, which is 12 to 18 months long. The funding cap for that is around £5,000, so you'd be expected to pay as a non-levy payer £500 towards that training, but for that 500 you get £5,000 worth of training. So that's a pretty good deal in anyone's book, I think. The actual levels of funding caps for recruitment consultant level 3, recruitment resourcer level 2 and HR support have not been published yet, so we're not sure what those would be. We'd take an educated guess to say maybe for recruitment consultant and resourcer there may be between £3,000 and £5,000, somewhere like that, but we're not entirely sure. They are imminent in terms of the publishing of those standards, but from a non-levy payer, expect to pay 10% of the value for that particular apprenticeship, and that is very, very good value.
Cool.
Now, if you are taking on somebody who's 16 to 18, not yet hit 19 when they start, that's a different arrangement. For them, there is no contribution at all, and on top of that, the government gives you back £1,000 as an incentive. So, but you have to have less than 50 employees for that to be the case. So it depends on who you're taking on, and not only who you're taking on. Remember, this applies to people who are already in the business as well, who you might want to put onto an apprenticeship program.
Thanks, Albert. And that actually leads us into the next point, is what can I spend my levy fund, or what can I have funded if you're not subject to the levy? What can you have? What can you spend it on? So the point here is around you can spend it on any apprenticeship delivered by an approved provider registered on the ROATP. Somebody has asked what's the best way to find out what recruitment training programs are on offer. The answer there is that you have to use a registered apprenticeship. You have to follow a registered apprenticeship framework or standard, as we saw in a previous slide, and you can find a whole list of those on the government website, their apprenticeship website. We've already talked about the fact that you can upskill existing staff at any level and any age, and there's some NI benefits for taking employees on under the age of 25 on an approved scheme. There's no upper age limit either. So it's not, we've reinforced this message, it's not just about taking on new recruits, although you can do that, but it's about providing people with the opportunity for this professional accreditation, whatever level they are. Is there anything anyone wants to add on to that slide there before we move?
Well, I think there's an important flexibility that came in as well under the new rules, which is that in the past, if people had got high qualifications, for example, a degree, they weren't permitted to undertake an apprenticeship, and they weren't entitled to receive funding to support that. That has changed now, so long as the apprenticeship is significantly different from the other higher level qualification that somebody's achieved. So a good example might be, and let me just quote a degree apprenticeship for an example, is that if somebody was working for you who has a first in history at Oxford, that is unlikely to have anything to do with recruitment. Therefore, they would be entitled and eligible for the apprenticeship, for a degree apprenticeship in management. And I think that's the difference. It really does open up opportunities to people that otherwise, through previous qualifications, weren't necessarily available.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Thanks, John. So moving on to our next key question that's come out from our discussions is why did the British Institute of Recruiters and APSCo join forces to create the Professional Apprenticeship Consortium? Perhaps if I can just pick that one off to start with. Certainly from APSCo's point of view, we provide classroom training for recruitment skills and management, and our management training is underpinned by the Chartered Management Institute. And we're really keen that any apprentices coming through into organisations to follow either of those routes, the recruitment or the management route, are getting recruitment-specific training designed and delivered by experts within their respective field. Because there are many providers out in the market who will be providing recruitment, resource and management training, but their training, their teaching may not be relevant to the recruitment market. So that, from APSCo's point of view, was one of our key drivers, was to ensure that we could retain the integrity and quality of the training of apprentices, recruitment and management apprentices, within the recruitment profession. So we were very keen to join forces with an organisation who have the experience in doing that, and that's why we joined forces with the BIOR. So Asmat, do you want to pick up on some other thoughts around that as to why you did the same, really?
Yeah, exactly. So the point of the Professional Apprenticeship Consortium is to help recruitment businesses navigate all of the information around apprenticeships and which ones are right for their business by simply coming to us with an inquiry, and we can help them in terms of what kind of recruitment qualifications are out there, what kind of management qualifications are out there, how they're delivered, over what period of time, what kind of funding you can access in terms of, like, if you're not a levy payer, what you have to pay, what the endpoint assessment might be, what does that mean. So we're a one-stop shop. Come to us in terms of getting that information first of all, and also in terms of recruitment, the British recruitment industry, we're the only ones actually listed on the government's register to deliver apprenticeships, whereas others are delivering through third parties. So as Julie said, with this particular creation of this particular consortium, it means that you're getting real recruitment specific training, and that's of huge value, because at the end of the day, you're not looking for generic information, generic support. You want something specific to a recruitment business, and that's what we're providing with people who are very highly qualified in recruitment, lots of experience, and know exactly what they're doing with this training. So by creating this consortium, you don't have to go through hundreds of pages on the government's website or lots and lots of different places. You can come to us and we can direct you and signpost you to whatever information you're looking for.
I think the other thing as well, Asma, is that we provide a nice blend of approaches from a learning and development point of view. So there's a blend of online training, classroom training, and as we've already heard, there's that element of that 20% sort of at-desk training and reflection that has to happen. So there's a nice blend of approaches through the 12 to 18 months that the apprentice has to be on the programme. Anything to add from our other colleagues in the consortium? No? Okay. It's probably worth now, I'll just flick through this because I think we've covered all those, which was just a summary of why we've been created. It's probably worth now just actually understanding through what the consortium can offer. We've talked about being a one-stop shop for all your front and back office training needs, and we've really reflected more on the resourcing, recruitment and management, but there are a whole host of other areas within the recruitment organisation that we could support through the consortium. So Asmat, would you like to take the audience through some of the ones that you've supported?
Yeah. Absolutely. So from a recruitment point of view, certificate in recruitment resourcing and certificate in recruitment, these two, they're not live for delivery on standards yet. We hope that they're imminent and we expect them to come in within the next 2-3 months, hopefully, and we can start delivering those. At the moment, they're on frameworks only. The team leading level 2 and 3, these are live qualifications. The HR support level 3 is not live yet, nor is the HR consultant partner. So there's a few things in here which are very, very focused on the recruitment consultant as opposed to the recruitment business. But also things like the digital marketeer. All recruitment businesses probably interested in recruitment marketing, how to market their vacancies, how to market their business and their brand. That's a really good one for them to look at as well. And obviously if businesses are looking for business admin, customer service, accountancy, those kind of things, they're covered as well. So because there's some of these are not yet live, some are, the best thing is if you're interested in these types of apprenticeships that are relevant to recruitment businesses, I would say drop us a line, tell us what kind of things you want to know about, or if you want us to have a conversation to go through everything, because it's quite a big list and there's a lot of considerations in terms of who you want to put on which particular course, but you're not specifically pigeonholed in just recruitment resourcing and recruitment level 2 and 3. It's beyond that. So management and HR support, digital marketing, it goes well beyond that into finance and other things as well.
Thanks, Asma. Somebody has asked that someone has said that why is it all so complicated when actually all they want to do is measure people's success on how much they bill. This all seems very very overcomplicated. I think we're sort of stuck with it, really, aren't we? That the framework, the standards have been written and structured through an employer group, and they're quite complex in the behaviour and knowledge that's required through the actual through the standard, aren't they? I don't know if anyone's got a comment to make on that.
I don't think there's anything in there that should be in there. John, do you want to comment there? I was just going to say
no, you carry on first. I'll fill in a few.
Yeah, there's nothing in there that doesn't need to be in there. So remember, these standards are created by a group of employers getting together of all sizes in a business, deciding what people should know in that industry if they're employed into those businesses. So this is the actual sector itself telling government, we need people with these skills to effectively manage our business. So things about billing and being good, but that's all part of it. That's not part of it. Of course it's part of it because that's of interest to the stakeholder group of employers who put this standard together. So all of those things are in there, but it wasn't just that. They wanted other behaviours, other skills to be embedded into that particular apprentice, or so that they have whatever that particular employer group felt was necessary for that level of position. So it's different for resource, it's different for recruitment consultant, it's different for team leader and supervisor, it's different for HR support. So these are really employer-led. Remember that they're employer-led. Employers want these particular skills within their staff. So everything you can possibly think of would have been discussed at those Trailblazer groups, and somewhere it will be in that standard and in the training that's delivered.
Okay, thanks, Asma. Whilst we've got this slide still on the screen with all our level 2, level 3s and level 4s, now we're all fairly used to seeing these written out against the standards and understand what they are. But for some of our audience, they'd like to know the difference between the levels. So perhaps we could just quickly talk. John, that might be a question for you, just to talk through very, very briefly, high level, just what's 2, 3, 4, and 5. What it equates.
Right. Well, I mean, for some time, people have tried to correlate an academic qualification with a vocational qualification, and there's a degree of success behind that, I suppose. The simple way of looking at it is that the levels will obviously determine the kind of job role that people are in. So if you are not managing someone else, generally, you're becoming at a level 2. It's kind of, level 1s don't really exist anymore. They used to be very much for the basic kind of shop floor operative worker. We've got level 2, which again are people that may not necessarily have anyone responding or reporting to them. You go level 3, easiest way is thinking of that in a kind of supervisory capacity. Level 4, kind of junior management, middle management. Then you're getting into level 5s, 6s and 7s. Level 6 and 7 is degree apprenticeships, and level 5 really is for senior managers. So there's a range. I think the benefit of that kind of range means that, again, depending on the business, you in actual fact can have people going across and developing through different levels as part of their succession planning. And I think that also means that there's something that makes them very sustainable as an employee. But the levels really are based around the kind of job role that people do and the number of people that might report to them and the degree of managerial or supervisory experience or empowerment that they might have.
Thanks, John. I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that when someone's thinking about taking on an apprentice, the first step will be to talk to a provider, such as a Professional Apprenticeship Consortium, be speaking to us, and we would assess where they sit within those levels. So if someone's proposing a particular level and we think, given that their background, their experience and their previous knowledge and qualifications, that it's too low or too high a level for them, you'd have that discussion at the outset, wouldn't you, to establish that they're going to be on the right road before you sign up and start to pull the funding down. Am I right in saying that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's part of what we would do in terms of providing that support, and that we make sure that the right person is at the right level and it's comfortable for them, because the key thing to make sure on the outset is that that person is capable of completing that course. And there's a number of ways we would assess that through initial assessments and other diagnostics to check that that person has the capability of completing that course, or if there's something higher that they should be doing, we'll identify that early on.
Okay, cool, thank you. Right, just moving on to another question from our key questions from the consortium, and that was around people hit. Someone had heard that there are different arrangements for the funding and administration of apprentices depending on which country you're in within the UK. John, can you pick up on that one, please? Because I understand it's complicated.
It is rather complicated. It's fair to say that England is probably way ahead, in fairness, of the other countries on how it sees the whole infrastructure of the apprenticeship system and the levy working. Of course, companies' levy bills are picked up by HMRC wherever they have employees. So if you've got employees in England, Wales, or Scotland, and Northern Ireland, essentially it goes through the HMRC pot. What they do is they will, the simplest way of looking at it is if there's 100% of your workforce, 90% of them are in England and 10% of them are in Scotland, then your whole levy payment, 10% of that will be assigned to Scotland to be used for apprenticeship delivery in Scotland. And that's the easiest way of looking at it, depending how your workforce is spread. Now, not all of the countries are doing things in the same way as England, because there are different government authorities running things through devolution. Some of the countries actually haven't even totally agreed how they're going to do it. I think the easiest way to look at it is England is all organised, we're all set up, we know precisely what we can do. If you also have employees in Scotland, in Wales or Northern Ireland, some of your levy money will be placed into the government authorities in those countries to be spent through through the agencies in those countries. If you have that kind of a question, if you're trading outside of England, if you'll get some contact details at the end of this presentation. If you want to just email us, let us know the countries that you trade in, and we can then speak to you directly about how that might affect that delivery, because things are the same but different, I suppose is the expression, and it's ever changing at the moment. So I think that's probably, without overcomplicating it, is the easiest way of looking at that particular scenario.
Thank you, John. It was a brave answer. Thank you. Right, so we're just moving on to, in fact, our last consortium question. I've got a couple of other questions from our audience that I'll come back to, but our last consortium question was, if you could give one piece of advice to a recruitment firm as to the essential elements to look for in an apprenticeship provider, what would it be? And I think if we can all take that as a response. So Fraser, could I go to you first and ask you that question?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose from our perspective, obviously we're the big thing now with the changing apprenticeships and you know, very much focus on job roles and sectors is probably looking for an apprenticeship provider that has a specialism in your sector. Somebody that you can be confident in, to take somebody, you know, perhaps entering a job role for the first time and give them the knowledge and skills to work effectively within your business. So I would definitely say sector specialists are going to be key moving forward in supporting apprentices.
Thank you. Asma?
Yeah, it's got to be that. The reason is, remember earlier on we said that the role of the provider is changing. So with frameworks, what the role of the provider was in terms of how it delivered the apprenticeship was it would do some delivery in terms of content and training, and then there would be assessment. That's all changed now. So under the new standards, the provider is responsible for getting people ready for endpoint assessment. They're not doing any assessment. They're doing teaching, supporting, coaching. So you need people who are experienced in that sector. If you go to a training company that does 70 different programs and they're not specialists in recruitment, what are the likelihood that they would be able to properly understand the needs of your staff and get them to endpoint assessment in a very recruitment specific way? It'd be very hard for them to do. So you have to go to providers who are specialists in your sector, and they will be able to give all the training and teaching for that individual to make sure that what they're learning is specific to your business and your industry. That's key.
If I could just pick up on that point as well, because I think the key thing there, I completely enforce everything that everyone said, that recruitment specific piece is key. But I think the other thing is that a provider, the apprenticeship provider, is consultative with the organisation and works out whether it's the right thing for you to be doing in your business. Somebody on our in our audience today has asked, do we have to go through the process in order to train a recruiter? And the answer is no, you don't. You have to work out whether the apprenticeship model is right for your business. And in most cases, it's right if you have somebody early on in their career who can afford, and you can afford time, and they are up for and committed to spending 12 to 18 months to learn and be qualified and experienced at the end of that 12 months. But clearly, if you have an immediate training need now for existing people or new people who need to be effective, you know, within the next few weeks, then investing and taking the time for a 12-month to 18-month program isn't the right thing. So no, you don't have to follow the process to train your recruiter. You do have to follow the process to be able to use your, if you're a levy payer, to pull your levy down, because that levy fund can only be paid against an approved apprenticeship. But you need to make sure you're working with a provider who is going to work in collaboration with you and choose the right method for you to use, because you don't want a learner who's not committed through the duration, because at the end of the day they need to get qualified, and you don't want to step into this process if you're not willing to commit the time and effort to supporting all the elements that we've talked through about it today. So that would be my piece of advice, tying in one of those questions that we had from the audience. John, have you got a wrap up there on that piece?
I think the only thing I would also say, and it sounds a bit like a contradiction in terms, the endpoint assessment is clearly an independent assessment of the training that the provider has delivered. I think Firstly, yes, you need a provider who is sector specific, who understands the sector, understands the type of business you're in, and can work with you on some of the flexibilities that can be added to an apprenticeship standard. I think equally though, it's important for that provider to have a relationship, in inverted commas, with the endpoint assessment company, because the critical thing is not just getting people through the training and development needed and getting them to what's called the gateway, but it is to make sure that once they go into the endpoint assessment, we know and you know as employers that they will achieve. And I think a kind of relationship that means that everything that is required for the endpoint assessment and the assessment plan is delivered, and that the relationship, I'm finding more and more with employers, they're not wanting to identify who they want the endpoint assessment company to be. They want that to work through the training provider, to know that there is, from the apprentice point of view and from the employer's point of view, a seamless process from start to finish that will get the achievement. And I think that's a rather important point as well.
Yeah, thank you, John. Okay, so we've had a flurry of questions just towards the end here. We did have one more slide that I'll just share with you there, which is sort of a bit of a summary as to why you should work with the Apprenticeship Consortium. Up to answer that question of who should you choose, well, clearly one of the options would be the Professional Apprenticeship Consortium. And there's a whole list of reasons there, with track record from the British Institute of Recruiters, APSCo and Skills First Awards in the areas in which where their expertise sits. So I'll leave you to read and muse on that point. We have just got a couple of questions that I think we've got 5-10 more minutes. We could just quickly cover some of the questions that have come through. Somebody's asked, can we direct the names of the large employers that have agreed and set those standards? That's the people who are part of the Trailblazer group. I think we can access that. I think it's in the public domain, I believe. Asmat, yeah. Can we send that out to afterwards?
I could probably pick that up if you like, Julie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
So the government on the apprenticeships website, if you have a look on the .gov.uk website, there's a document there that lists the employers who are involved in developing all of the standards. So it's quite easy to find, and that'll tell you who's been involved in the recruitment standards specifically.
Okay, we'll make it easier for you. We'll pull that down and send that out to you with the.
I can send it on.
Lovely, thank you. What do apprentices get paid, and who pays it? So this is obviously for newly recruited apprentices coming in. I'm guessing that depends on which standard they're following. Who would like to pick that up?
Well, there is an apprenticeship wage, which is under the living wage, but there is no higher level that an apprentice needs to be paid. So the apprenticeship wage as such is quite a low amount of money in some ways.
£3.50 an hour if you're under 19. Yeah,
so £3.50 an hour. I think a lot of it is thinking about what do you get for your money, I think is the reality of it. So, apprenticeships for young people, 16 to 18-year-olds at £3.50 an hour, one can look at that and say, well, that's actually a very inexpensive employee. But bear in mind that this is somebody coming into your business who won't be able to hit the ground running. They're going to need a lot of support and advice and help and mentoring. I think, it has been proven time and time again by some of the larger companies that where the living wage, or particularly where perhaps the normal rate of pay is in a particular sector, then getting people in as new employees will be much more effective, because they're seeing themselves as earning, a decent amount of money for the job that they do. So there is a minimum, there is no maximum. It just fits within your normal pay grades if you want to stick to those. So, there are some flexibilities.
Just to add to that, just to make it clear, so if you take on an apprentice and they're basically under 19 years old, or they're over 19 and in the first year of their apprenticeship, then you can pay them £3.50 an hour. Having said that, if you do, it's likely that person may want to leave after a while because they'll get more money from someone else. So typically then, if you switch to national sort of minimum wages and living wages. You could be paying for an under 18. You might want to look at paying, instead of £3.50, £4. 18 to 20, £5.60. 21 to 24, £7, 5, and 25 and over, £7.50. So you just because you can pay the £3.50, it's probably better to think about a little bit more to make sure that that individual can certainly live, get to work, have lunch every day, and live with the money that they're earning.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Asma. A couple of questions around a similar theme about time. One question is, you mentioned the time commitment from the employer. Can you give a relevant example of how much time? But before we come on to that one, another question someone asked was, would the time an apprentice spends in training depend on the qualification level they're working towards? So the answer to that is yes. So each standard has a time period assigned to it. So if you go on a government website and pull up the resource or recruitment consultant or any other apprenticeship standard, it'll give you a guideline of a time frame. And then that time frame is agreed when you do that initial assessment with your provider as to the experience that that person's already had. Clearly someone with more experience is going to get through the programme more quickly than someone who's literally starting out. But the bit about the commitment from the employer, I think we've talked about the 20% requirement for reflection of learning. Anyone else got a comment on that? About an example of how much time the employer would need to give to commit to the training for these apprentices?
I think from a training point of view, employers do need to be aware that there is a commitment there, and that 20% of the time when that particular person is on the job and not particularly doing the job that they're being paid to do, we can help with providing a list of activities. We've got a list of activities of how an employer may mentor and support that individual in growing in the business. And don't forget, this isn't about an employer being inconvenienced because this person is having to spend time learning and not doing the job. This is about as quickly as possible, getting this person to a point where they're able to do more for that business and be more productive. So we can share activities, a list of activities that an employer can do. For instance, they can be mentoring, they can be taking them to other parts of the business and showing them how those parts of the business work, certain aspects of e-learning. There's lots about that particular company's training. There could be lots of different things that can be included that are very relevant to that business. So we'll talk through that with anyone looking to take on an apprentice in more detail and make sure it's a very bespoke program that fits the requirements of that business as well.
And that ties in as
probably worth.
Sorry, so I was just going to say that ties in quite nicely. Go.
I think Fraser was
probably worth adding that 20%. You know, it certainly doesn't have to be what you might have described as the old day release model, where you went a day to college. This is, as Asmat was saying, something which can be flexible and should be based around the situation that the employer and the apprentice is in.
Thank you, Fraser. And that bespokeness that Asmat was talking about fits in quite neatly with somebody else's question about what if we've got quite a well-structured training program already within our business? How does the apprenticeship sit side by side? And I think that goes back to one of the points that I made about choosing an organisation who will be consultative with you, who will take the time to look at your own learning and development initiatives and make sure that this blended approach fits in neatly with what you're doing. So you don't have too much duplication, and equally you don't have loads of gaps. We're running out of time. I think we've got a whole host of questions. As I say, there's a big old flurry at the end there, which is fantastic. Thank you very much for your commitment. We'll take all those offline, we'll type them up, and we'll get the answers from the consortium, and we'll share them back with everybody, so you all get a chance to see what other questions were asked. It only leaves me just to move to our last slide, which is quite simply, where can you go to find out more? Clearly, there's the British Institute of Recruiters, there's APSCo. You've already heard from Skills First Awards, our endpoint assessment provider. So you've got the information there on your slide. I think Zina's just going to wrap up very briefly with us.
Okay, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to everyone who registered and joined the webinar today. I do hope you have got your questions answered. As Julie mentioned, we have we've received loads of questions, so we are going to prepare a document which is going to be emailed to you later on today, along with or tomorrow, along with the presentation and the recording in case you want to share this with your team or any of your colleagues. So thank you all for your time and have a great rest of the day from all of us at APSCo.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Final words, Asmat, from you?
Yeah, I'm just saying that if you have any queries, do get in touch with us. The emails are on this last slide, and from our point of view, it's not about trying to get everything you need to know in this one webinar. There's lots of information. We'd be more than happy to have a chat and talk you through the whole process and see if it works for you, but not a problem with that at all. Just get in touch.
Lovely. All right, then, well, thanks for your time and have a good day. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.